Do we have anybody on the virtual?
Through the chair, it does not appear as though there are any residents on the virtual call-in at this time.
We'll do approval of the minutes and we'll go to public participation. Item 2A is order that the City Council Standing Committee of Municipal Legislative Operations hereby approves the minutes of the Municipal Legislative Operations Committee meeting on June 6, 2024. The motion would be to approve. Oh, could you do a roll call?
Councilor Ojeda?
Yes.
Councilor Clorio?
Yes.
And Chairperson Councilor Bergman?
Yes. Now we'll move to the public portion of tonight's standing subcommittee meeting. Anybody in the public wishes to address any items on the agenda, please come forward, state your name and city of residence, and your comments, please.
Hi, Tom Marino. I live in Oxford, but as some of you probably know, I've worked in the city for a very, very long time. Wanted to speak on 3A. I have thanked the councilor who brought the order for including other provisions within the rules. I'd like to address some of those. On the rules mentioned, 21, 22, and 35, I don't think they need to be changed. We need more people to speak during council, not less. I would like to talk about Rule 51, 52, and 53. These are the rules that the chair picks the agenda items. A discharge required back to the council requires a 2/3 vote, and 53 is the provision that automatically tables items. This is a pocket veto for the chairperson of every committee, requiring more than the federal filibuster in the Senate to get an item out of committee should the chairperson not decide to put it on an agenda. That's not good. In my opinion, this rule should automatically discharge items back to council after 90 days. There's no reason why every committee can't meet at least every 90 days. Most importantly, I would like to address Rule 11. First, would like to say that this has nothing to do with any individual serving in any office currently. This is what I think is a systemic issue. Rule 11, in part, allows or enables the solicitor to have a role in deciding what goes on city council's agenda. Our charter, Article 1, Section 4, defines a legislative branch and an executive branch. This has long history in America, Massachusetts Constitution, Federalist 47, the U.S. Constitution. We are a town. We don't have a single branch of government. In a town, say a select system, the select board is the executive, and the manager is largely a worker bee. We have two branches, and that a member of the executive branch that serves at the executive of the city's pleasure would have any role in deciding what council does is frankly preposterous. That is a member of the executive branch with direct influence over items that the city council hears. That's ridiculous. I remember there was a vote last year that the members of this committee that were here voted against having their own the council having its own attorney. That is certainly your prerogative. What I don't think is when you're within your prerogative to abdicate the independence of the legislature to the executive branch. That is bad, bad, bad civics. Thank you.
Before you leave, I just want to be clear on what your the specific rule. I was listening and the specific
Rule 11
you had.
was the last one.
Okay, so we'll go back because we have a number of rules that we hope to discuss tonight. Go back to Rule 11. So your concern, if I understood you correctly, is that somebody outside of the council is making the decision on whether or not the council agenda.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood your concern.
Yeah, I see that as an infringement on the council's independence, which it should be very independent.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the public? From the public?
Yes, I actually,
Just your name and city of residence, please.
thank you so much.
Sure.
I actually have a question, a point of order. If I speak now, can I speak later on my petition?
Well, I know you're Gordon Davis, and I know it's your item, and if I don't have any objections from either of my colleagues, which I don't think I will, it doesn't look like the room's packed with too many people, so I certainly have no objection to hearing you twice. But you do have to state your name and city of residence.
Thank you. Gordon Davis. I live in Worcester.
Okay, thank you.
I've come to speak on Rule 11 of the City Council. And the reason I'm speaking is that Rule 11 is confused. It's whimsical, it's frivolous, it's arbitrary. It uses the term personality. Well, what is a personality? That should be defined somewhere in the City Council rules. It also comes up with all the reasons that something should not appear in the petition, but examples of what should not appear should be made. That is, can we petition or resolve the rescue of the astronauts who are stuck in the space station? I mean, give us some idea as to what can be done and what these arbitrary and seems to be whimsical definitions are. And if I can speak again later, I'd like to do that.
Unless my colleagues have any issue, I gave you my commitment that you can, so not an issue. All right, since this is, let's go to item 3A. Order of Councilor Don M. Clory, request standing committee on municipal and legislative operations review the rules of the City Council, section titled Conduct of Council Meetings, including but not limited to Rules 21, 22, and 35, in an effort to determine whether any amendments to the rules of the City Council would better ensure all speaking portions of the City Council meetings are done efficiently and in a procedurally accurate manner. So what I'd like to do is, because Mr. Davis, yes. Your item is item 3B. So I'm going to go to the rules 21, 22, and 35 that are specific to item A, and then we're going to take up your item B right after. So I don't want you to think I'm missing the rule that you're concerned most about. But I want to do this as I read the agenda. So this is item 3A. So let's go to Rule 21 specifically. We all have our handy books, or hope we do. Rule 21 is titled, No Speaking for More Than 5 Minutes. Okay? So Councilor Clorio, since it's your item, could you give us some of your thoughts on your concerns about Rule 21?
Would you mind reading it first?
Sure.
Okay.
After being recognized by the chair, no council shall speak for more than 5 minutes at a time, no more than 10 minutes total on any agenda item or a group of calendar items taken collectively. The chair may grant additional time to any council if comments made by the city manager or other individuals in response to the questions have taken an unusual amount of time. The chair shall make note of the time each member is recognized. Whenever any member substantially exceeds 5 minutes during their first time speaking on an item, the chair may rule that the member is being allocated his or her second 5 minutes, and the member shall be deemed to have waived his or her right to speak twice on an item. That's Rule 21. And of course, these are the rules of the City Council, if anybody's listening in and unsure which rules we're talking about. And I believe they're online under the clerk's section of the City of Worcester website.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my objective or my thoughts on looking over the rules was that we receive this book when we become councilors. We don't spend a lot of time reading it. And then when things come up, we refer back to it. So I thought it'd be a good way to refresh and talk about some of the rules. And as I was putting this on the agenda, I had a couple councilors that said it would be nice to include, but not limited to. So there could be other rules, as you mentioned, being discussed. So I thought it would be a good time to read the rules talk about the rules. And when I was on school committee, we had the School Committee Association come in and do kind of like a evaluation of how we ran meetings in some of our procedural work. And one of the things that kept coming up was making meetings more efficient, making it shorter, making it more condensed. So I saw areas where there's things that are that could be condensed. There's areas in rules that we could just maybe enforce more and look at and have an open discussion. And I thought this would be a good time to do it, is and kind of work on some of the, some of the rules. So this rule is, I personally do not believe it's enforced enough. And there's times where people do talk more than 5 minutes and more than 10 minutes. And I think it takes away from the quality of the item that we're dealing with. I think if, in 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes, for those that, I tend to just be a little bit more direct when I speak. And I think that we could enforce this a lot better, this rule here, and we could really kind of condense our meetings so we can deal with the issues at hand. Because I know sometimes when our meetings go to like 11 o'clock at night, the items that are at the end of the night don't get as much time as the items at the beginning of the night. So I think it would be, in my opinion, an item or rule that could be enforced. And one of the things that I've observed, and I mean, this is up to the chair whether you want to make the recommendation or not, is back, I want to say maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, when I did a little bit more interaction at the State House and I testified at the State House, when you approached the podium, there would be a clock that you could see, so you didn't have to question or look down on your phone to see if you've exceeded or you went over the 2 minutes as a, public participation, or as a counselor, if you went over your 5 minutes, and you could clearly see what time you had left. So, I mean, I don't know why we don't have some kind of a double-sided clock on the, at the mayor's position post to just indicate when, and, your time was up. So, I mean, these are some of the things that I've thought of over the years that I think can be a little bit better in making us a little bit more efficient and just kind of fine-tuning, our time so we can spend it as many items as we can, because sometimes our agendas, as you know, Mr. Chair, are extremely long, like last night, and, you want to spend as much time as you can on the items that are, you want to be able to get to all the items equally as much. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councilor Hida, I omitted introducing Alexandra Kalkunas, who's a Deputy City Solicitor, and we thank her for joining us here tonight as well. Councilor Hida?
On Rule 21, I think, being 7 months in and understanding, the 5-minute rule, I think we've been able to, go over at times, but I think, in reading and understanding this, there are times where there are questions being asked and going back and forth, so it does take away from the 5 minutes. So I'm not sure if that is really being timed as far as coming back and be able to continue your initial argument or what you want to speak on. So that's my only take.
I appreciate that. I think one of the things that I took note of that I think is odd is that the rule says the chair shall make note of the time each member is recognized. I mean, I would like to think that the chair would use his time and attention better to listening to the arguments and calculating out how many minutes somebody spoke. So if there's no objection by either of my colleagues, I think a chairman's order that would be consistent with what I'm hearing is asking for best practices in other cities or communities for mechanical or technical aids in timing the speakers. I know as an attorney, if I ever went to the appeals court, they have and they maybe don't even have it anymore, they used to, they may have advanced the technology, like a red, almost looks like a cone. And when that, kind of like a traffic light, you get a yellow warning, which means wind down, and then when it becomes red, you're done. So I know the chair has leave to give people additional time, so I'm less concerned with using that as a punishment. I think it might be helpful, not only to not force the chair to keep track of everybody's minutes, but also to make people more aware of when their time is up. So I don't have any issue, and I think it's a good idea to see what technology exists to aid us in doing that, and see if other communities do something like that could give us some guidance. So that would be the chairman's order. Ms. Robbins, do you understand my long-winded
Through
chairman?
the chair, certainly my understanding is you're requesting the clerk to draft a report with best practices regarding time tracking and time tracking technology in other cities and legislative bodies.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep, Councilor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank your fellow committee members, Vice Chair Ojeda and Councilor Clorio, for the work that you're doing here in municipal operations. As a former chair for the last 4 years of this body, of this committee, I know the importance of the work that you are doing and will continue to do. That being said, I wanted to point out a couple of things. We are, as a city council, the closest form of government to the people, and that's as it should be, Mr. Chairman. We should be as accessible to folks. In subcommittee, is an opportunity, as we just saw today, that the rules are not the same in both bodies, and I think that's a good thing. The work is always done in committee, and that's part of the argument around trying to streamline some of the work we do on the council side. That being said, as vice chairman of this council, Councilor Clory is also a former vice chair person, and we have Mayor Petty, who's the longest serving mayor in the history of the city, the longest serving chairman of this body. He also chairs the school committee. When it comes to looking at these things such as item 21, no speaking for more than 5 minutes, I know from my real life experience, even this year, that we're not timing during speaking by someone other than the counselor during their time. I actually just had that conversation with Mayor Petty last night. You know, in addition to that, when you're talking about, there's a stop-start hand timer that's used by Mayor Petty and myself for timing of participation. Doesn't take away. It's just simply a start and stop. It runs for 5 minutes, and you tell folks you're in your second 5 minutes. In addition to that, the counselor had referenced red timing. If you take a look right up here underneath that window, you'll see a timer. That timer, there's a control switch right here that goes in front of the clerk or Mayor Petty or myself as vice chair of this council that counts down from 5 minutes or counts up. And there's a appropriate sounding mechanism that's a part of that. Why am I saying that? Because we have the tools here present in this body. In addition to that, Mr. Chairman, you know, as mentioned, Mayor Petty has quite a long history of chairing this council. You know, saying that we're not doing things efficiently, from my perspective, is an indictment of his leadership and his ability to manage the meeting. When we heard some comments about not being able to discuss things after long meetings. We've had so many meetings that didn't occur for various reasons, religious holidays and otherwise this year, that those joint agendas do drag meetings out, Mr. Chairman. We have within our rules, we have the ability to call for special meetings if we so choose, and that requires a counselor to initiate that with a certain number of folks signing on, I think 3 or 4, and then the mayor can call a special meeting as well. So anybody can call for a special meeting if there needs to be additional conversations. You know, I do think that we should do all that we can to not limit civic engagement. We have to be crystal clear that that's not what we're doing here. We've had similar items come forward in the past that were thinly veiled attempts of limiting participation and counselor engagement, Mr. Chairman. The last thing I'd like to say regarding Rule 21 and Rule 22, that any time a decision is made per our rules by whoever's chairing the meeting, if we don't deem as a council body that that decision is right, we can make a motion to contest the ruling of the chair, and that includes time. There's plenty of mechanisms at place here in this elected body through Robert's Rules of Order that we can engage in, and we certainly should not be making rules, targeting elected officials who do participate on the floor, particularly from elected officials that are least likely to participate on the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to these matters coming before council. And as far as speaking more than twice, we've had a couple occasions recently we suspend the rules. And I think, Mayor Petty and myself, we do a good job of making sure and taking into account the subject at hand and the political landscape and the public need, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor King. Deputy Solicitor Clerk Kunis, is there anything you want to add to this conversation?
Through the chair, unless you have any specific questions, no. I mean, the rules are pretty clear. I'm not sure if you need any amendments. The chair can decide to suspend the rules and give more time if they want. You could just implement, processes and make it clear in the beginning of a meeting that we're going to follow our rules. A lot of other cities and towns have, timers that like ding so that the speaker is aware. So just procedural issues that we could implement.
If I have if there's no objection from my colleagues, I'd like to have the chairman's order read back, because I may add some language now that we've been informed that technology is in this building already. Claire, could you read that back?
Through the chair, the original chairman's order was request that the clerk draft a report with best practices regarding time tracking and the use of time tracking technology in other cities and legislative bodies.
And could you add to include existing technology currently in the chamber?
Through the chair, certainly. So my understanding is to include existing technology in the Worcester City Council.
Thank you. The other question I have for our Deputy City Solicitor is, as I read this rule, it applies to the City Council meetings. First of all, I just want to make it clear. This is what we're talking about is the time frame that councilors get to speak. This has nothing to do with the time frame the public gets to speak. So I know there was some reference to limiting public participation. One could argue that the councilor speaks for their constituents, so indirectly we are talking about time frames, but we're not talking about the public portion of the meeting. So I'd like to ask our Deputy City Solicitor, as I read Rule 21, it does not apply to our Finance Subcommittee meetings, which we have usually in May, which are technically, I believe, Finance Committee and not council meetings. Is that correct?
Through the chair, correct.
So one of the things I'd like to bring out is I feel that those meetings are really city council meetings, not subcommittee meetings in the sense of what we're doing here today. And I think whatever Rule 21 applies to should also apply to the Finance Subcommittee meetings. I think 5 minutes and 10 minutes total time is more than enough time to discuss the finance matters, with the opportunity for the chair always to add additional time. I know in these subcommittee meetings, oftentimes there are topics that people need to get into. Traffic and parking can go on for a long time when people speak because they're neighborhood issues. I just don't know if finance should be considered differently with no time limit. So I'd welcome both my colleagues if they have any thoughts on that. Councilor Calorio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things, if you can just, during finance, so when we talk about a department and we're talking about the finance of one department, we're talking about 10 councilors. Each councilor spends, let's say we went to the max, 10 minutes, and that means we're talking over an hour, maybe, what's that? Yeah, over an hour on one department. And usually we have 6 or 7 departments, you know, to discuss. So even at the present rules, we have a lot of time to speak in finance. And usually finance, we've thought about it through the whole year because, you know, it's like, oh, this came up, we don't have enough money, or this, you know, we can allocate the money here and there. So we're always, it's an evolving process in finance because we take notes all year long and we think about, oh, well, in budget time, I'm gonna ask for this, or I'm not gonna ask for this. So it's a little bit more condensed. So right now, this is ample time in finance, and we all tend to speak in finance, you know, most of us, because it's our opportunity, it's our one opportunity during the year to really kind of pull everything together that we thought about fire, police, schools, or whatever. So I think I would support your chairman's order, and I think it's a great idea to tie this into the finance as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Hayda, your thoughts?
Yes,
Oh,
all right, no problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree as well. I think it also will allow us to pretty much get to the point quicker and faster and just talk about the things that really pertain to what we want to talk about during finance versus, you know, having those discussions that continue to go on and they go back and forth where you just have your particular items that you've already done your research or you've looked in and really want to address. Knowing you have more time would allow you to use up all the time, but you could be more focused on what you really want to address.
well, thank you. I agree. I think in finance, the answers are more numbers than emotional and complicated discussions. So City Solicitor, Deputy City Solicitor Kalkunas, is there anything that is a red flag to you if there's a chairman's order asking that Rule 21 also include finance subcommittee meetings of the City Council?
Through the chair, no. So the Committee on Finance is a committee of the whole, which is essentially just a parliamentary, you know, opportunity for the council as a whole to relax its rules. So it is not a true, you know, subcommittee because the entire council's there, but you do have the authority to relax the rules. And with that being said, the council as a whole also has the authority to impose the time limits too. So that's a recommendation you could make to the body.
Okay, I think I'll make that recommendation. So, Claire, if you could, it would be a chairman's order for the body to consider including the Finance Committee, the Rule 21 time limitations on Finance Committee meetings.
Through the chair, certainly. So that's to consider Rule 21 applied to the Finance Committee meetings as well.
Thank you. Rule 22 is no speaking more than twice. I'll go to my colleagues' thoughts on this. I would just say that if Rule 21, it's my opinion only, were enforced better, Rule 22 would not be as big of an issue to me. So, anybody want to comment on that? Councilor Clorio?
Sure. I just want to, you know, say that I agree with you on that, Mr. Chair. It's just a matter of let's review Rule 22. I have no problem with keeping it the way it is, but I think the key is enforcement. And as we know, in every time we review things and everybody's on the same page and everybody understands what the rules are, it's much easier to say, you know, I mean, I can tell you that when I first got on council, I didn't realize that I could challenge the chair and say, you know, point of order and say, you know, this person's speaking 3 times and it says Rule 22, they can only speak twice. So if people feel that they can understand the rules, they feel more empowered as a councilor, then I think this will all take a little bit more responsibility in making this as efficient as possible. Thank you.
Councilor Hida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my take on it is there are times where the conversations gets really good, right? They get become very meaningful, and there's a lot of back and forth. Yeah, being able to speak twice, but there is an opportunity to, and I'm drawing a blank here, to an exception to the rule. Is that correct? And would that still be something that would be
I could answer for you, but I'll have our deputy city solicitor answer that question for you.
So just to confirm, the question is if you could suspend the rules and allow for a third or fourth time. So yes, and specifically when there is a lot of back and forth on a topic, the chair has that authority.
Yeah, then I'm fine with that, sure. Thank
My
you.
inclination on Rule 22 would be to do no chairman's orders at this time and see how we do on Rule 21 first. There's no objection to that. I'd like to move to Rule 35, which I think is a very interesting rule that is probably the most overlooked, and again, just my opinion, the most potential for not limiting any public discourse, but running our meetings much more efficiently. Others may disagree. So as I understand Rule 35, I'll read Rule 35. When considering a council order properly before the city council, the filer of the item shall be recognized to introduce the item. If by the text of the item or by the expressed intention of the filer, it appears that the item is to be referred to a standing committee of the city council or the city manager or to any other appropriate individual or body, the chair shall permit no other debate except to recognize councilors who wish to oppose the item or request clarification of the item or to offer an amendment to the item or to amend the motion to refer. So and I'll ask our deputy city solicitor to confirm that I'm correct, but to me, if an item was properly before the chair, and the chair developed a process where after the item was read by the chair would ask if it would recognize if the item is being referred out, and then would ask if there's anybody that opposes the item, wishes clarification of the item, or opposes the item, and if the answer is no, then the item would just get sent to the appropriate committee, because the real discussions happen in the committee, and then the further real discussions happen when things come out of committee before the council to deliberate. The initial conversations are often premature because we don't even know, the item hasn't been vetted yet through the committee. So I think we lose a lot of time by discussing items before they even get to the committee. That's my own personal thought on this, and I'd like to see, some clarification on what we can do on this item to make it happen, because I think it would not weaken or dilute our, the democratic process, but I think it would make our meetings more efficient. So let me just, before I get to my colleagues, Deputy City Solicitor Kalkunas, am I correctly, in general terms, explaining what Rule 35 is?
Through the chair, yes. I would just caution that, we could still, this is not regarding public comment, right? So, the council wouldn't be able to speak, but the public, if they were here for an agenda item, could speak.
Right, yeah, no, my intention wouldn't be that the public can speak on it. It would just be that when it gets to the council floor, that the chair would ask the councilors if there's any objection or need to clarify or need to amend, and if the answer, and an item would have to be heading out to a committee. If the answer was yes to all of those after public participation, then it should just be sent out to the committee. If we're going to allow other councils to debate it, then it kind of defeats the purpose of Rule 35, and that's up to everyone. Obviously, I've stated my opinion. So does any of my colleagues have any thoughts on it? Council Clorio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yes, I have very strong opinion about this rule. I agree with the rule, and I remember, I'm just sitting here thinking back, when I first got on, it was like the first or second time I was on council, there was an item brought up, and it was brought up by a resident. It wasn't a council order, it was a resident order, and I wasn't too sure of, Robert's rules or what was happening, so I raised my hand and I go, I totally support this item, and I said a few things. It was about the Duffy Field item, and I sat right down and I expected all my colleagues to say something, and no one said anything. And then I realized this got sent to Parks, and when it got sent to Parks, all the real work began, and it was, packed house every time that we brought it to Parks, every time we discussed Duffy Field. It had a lot of civic and engagement, and people were fired up, and people had a lot of passion, and I think that's where the real work begins. And there was nothing to say, did anybody oppose this or anything? But, so I realized very quickly, like, really, that sometimes without any kind of data or without any kind of facts, an item comes up to council and it becomes a 2-hour discussion with nothing to base, no facts or anything. Instead, if it went to this committee meeting and then we had facts and we had more information about the item, or we had time to research the item a little bit more, it would become a better and healthier, I believe, conversation.
Councilor Hayden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree with Councilor Caloria. I think it's important to be able to bring it back to committees where, people have an opportunity to speak to it, understand it, and understand the process. I think that's important. I think what we need to make sure our residents, constituents understand, all this is, there's a process for a reason, and it also allows them to see the process and be a part of it as well. And I think that's important. But also making sure that when it leaves committee, it leaves, sorry for lack of a better word or phrase, well prepared to be presented to council. So I agree.
I mean, I appreciate that. I think what Rule 35 was intended to do, I wasn't the author of Rule 35, but I think it's intended to reflect the fact that the committee is where the work really should be done, and where the kind of the gleaning of what the facts are and preparing the item if it's going to get voted on takes place. I think it's often a premature conversation amongst councilors when we first see an item without really knowing kind of the meat and bones of what the item's all about. So let me ask our Deputy City Solicitor, this rule already exists, and if I'm explaining it correctly, and if we take note of what you're saying, which I think we all agree with, that we can't change this rule in a way that would diminish public participation, I think I would make a chairman's order to have the chair consider asking these questions prior to, I guess would be after reading the item, to read the Rule 35 language as to whether or not there is any councilor wishes to oppose the item, or to request clarification of the item, or to offer an amendment to the item, or offer an amendment to the motion to refer. And if the answer is no to all of that, then the item gets referred without any debate. But I mean, I think that's the intent of the rule.
Through the chair, I agree.
You guys okay with that? Councilor Clorio, Councilor Hayda? Claire, did you get that? I know that was a
Through the
little
chair, could you
long-winded.
just repeat the exact language you're looking to use?
Yeah, I'd ask that the Rule 35 be, I'm trying to think of the best word I want to use. Rule 35 be enforced by the chairperson after introducing an agenda item, ask the body the Rule 35 language, which is, does anybody oppose the item? Anybody request clarification of the item? Or anybody offer an amendment to the item? Or does anybody offer an amendment to the motion to refer? And if the answer is no to all of those, that there be no debate and the item be referred to the appropriate committee or department.
Through the chair, are you looking, just for clarification, so are you looking more so for this to be enforced more frequently, or are you looking for it to be amended to have that question be asked first before?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think it wants to be enforced, but I think the best way to enforce it is, let's say there's an item to, ask for money for some constituent concern, and the mayor reads the item, and then before everybody's hands go up to talk about it, I would envision that the chair, the mayor, would ask, does anybody on this body object or oppose this item? Does anybody in this body request clarification of the item? Anybody offer amendment to the item, or offer any amendment to the motion to refer? If the answer is no, which is the language of Rule 35, then there'd be no debate, and the item be referred to either the appropriate subcommittee or to the manager. I mean, that's what the rule says, so I don't, I
Through the
think it's a
chair,
combination of enforcing it, but also I think the mayor has to read that, because none of us know that, well, many of us don't know that this exists, or if we do, we kind of ignore it, myself included.
Through the chair, understood. I can certainly work something up that reflects that language.
Councilor Hayder, you have a suggestion? Happy to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Maybe instead of using the word enforce, pretty much, you know, ask the mayor or the chair to read this specifically. Not the whole thing, obviously, but just to read exactly what we're trying to get to for all of us to understand, you know, this point in particular, this rule in particular.
I think it's an excellent suggestion. Claire, I can give you the language, or copy, but under Rule 35, where it begins, it appears that the item is to be referred to a standing committee of the city council or the city manager. The chair shall permit no other debate except to recognize council. It's that portion of Rule 35
Through the chair, understood. I can certainly make that into a
that I
chairman's
think
order.
should be read. I like that better than the word enforce. I agree. Thank you. Thank you. On Rule 35, any other comments or suggestions on that? It's a chairman's order. I think the subcommittee work is, or the committee work is most important when it relates to that, and I'm certainly willing to move on to other rules if there's no other conversation about it. Councilor Clara?
Want to take Gordon's first before we went to other rules?
No, I'm going to just take one other one, and then we'll go to Mr. Davis,
Okay.
because it relates to your order, which says, but not limited to. I want to go to Rule 29, which is something that I've kind of been focused on over the years. Rule 29A, accepting only proposed ordinance, appropriation orders, and loan authorizations. The city council, okay, I'm sorry, 29B. On the first occasion that a question of adopting any measure is put to the city council, except an emergency measure, if a single member objects to the taking of a vote, the vote should be postponed until the next regular or special meeting of the city council. So what I'm concerned about, or what bothers me about how we operate under Rule 29B, is not anybody's right to hold an item. Everybody's personal privilege is personal privilege. It doesn't even matter to me, because I've done both, whether the item is held before the meeting or during the meeting when the discussion of the item is before the council. But what I do think is inefficient and ineffectual is when an item is announced, it's held before the public speaking portion takes place, the chair always tells the public that it's being held, they can speak now, but they can't speak a second time. In practical terms, that never works, because we don't monitor who comes back the second time, we don't take attendance, and it seems to me that if an item's held before the public portion, it's no longer on the agenda, and if it's no longer on the agenda, then folks that want to speak from the public have every right to speak the next time it's before the council. But to speak twice, personally, I think is very inefficient. So I'm going to first ask our deputy city solicitor, from an open meeting law point of view, if you know, is there any issue with allowing the speaking portion to only address items that are not held? I guess that's what I'll ask.
Through the chair, no. If it's announced at the beginning of the meeting before the item's taken up, the chair has the authority, and it's in the rules, to delay or postpone the public comment to when the item's going to be discussed.
Because I think the chair tries to do that, but I don't think there's any practical way it's being done. So, Councilor Cluria?
Through the chair, so I get both sides of this, because someone comes down here and they have, they got a babysitter, or they got made arrangements, and then they want to speak, and, we try to be accommodating. But on the other hand, I understand about the inefficiencies. So one of the things that I have heard or read from other communities is, like our meetings are at 6:30, by 5 o'clock, any items, any councils have the personal privilege to hold an item. At 5 o'clock, it's posted on the website what items are being held. That way, people don't make the trip down here. That gives them an hour and a half time, or 4 o'clock. You can even say 4, I don't know, make a time up. That way, we don't inconvenience the general public. And then what we do is we respect the rules, and we hold a meeting that's a little bit more efficient. And I think that that is kind of a win-win for everybody.
Thank you. Counselor Hayden?
Yeah, I agree. But that got me thinking about what happens when a resident isn't able to see it, right? And, or they get here and say the meeting time changed, right? Like yesterday's was 6 o'clock versus 6:30. There was other times where we started a little earlier and someone came in, they weren't, so we gave them that time to speak. You know, just to take into account of things like that happening. And I also agree, right? You have someone here that, you know, they get ready, and let's be honest, it's not easy coming up here and be able to speak sometimes. You know, all eyes are on you, and some people get nervous, and they set up time, babysitter time to be able to speak, and then they find out, you know, that it's been held and I have to come back next week or whenever they have the opportunity. That also does take up time if they're here and we're just hearing them speak, but we can't talk on it. So again, if we're focusing on trying to be more efficient and be able to get through this process a little quicker, I think being able to give them that opportunity to say, you know what, it's being held, you know, we won't need to hear it or hear it next. I think that's probably a better way.
No, I appreciate it. I know this one is the one that's harder for me because I understand what both of you are saying, and I agree. Somebody might be driving in from another location and never see the notice that it was held. But one of the things I was thinking of is maybe some sort of compromise or suggestion is, if people do speak when an item is held, what if we had them sign in so that the next time when they spoke, they would know that I already spoke the last time because there are meetings where people sign in. I'm not suggesting as a general rule people sign in, but on those occasions where an item is held, but somebody feels it's a hardship for them to not speak, they speak, but they sign in so that the next time the item is heard, we have a list of who's already had their chance to speak. Now, I'm going to ask our deputy city solicitor if that runs afoul, or if we need a report to see if that runs afoul of any open meeting law rules.
Through the chair, you could definitely have a sign-in sheet. A lot of other even boards and commissions do that here. The planning board, for example, if there's an application on that is going to be postponed, they either have a sign-in sheet or people submit written comments, or they, you know, have to come to the next meeting. But for 29B, I just want to point that is 29B comes from the city charter, so I would not recommend amending the rule, but something like a sign-in sheet would be, you know, a process, like you could implement a process to make that rule more effective.
Could we limit, if somebody came in and the item was held and they signed in and they were allowed to speak and we told them that their option is to speak today or come back and they chose to speak that day, could we limit them speaking the next time? Is that
correct? Yes, and that's how the rule reads.
How do my colleagues feel about that? Councilor Clorio?
I have a question for the solicitor. In some situations, and I'm just referring back to my time when I testified at the State House, we had the sign-up sheet in the hallway, and we all signed up, and after a certain amount of people, because they allowed only X amount of time with public comment, they would cut you off. You know what I mean? And I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying that, is that something that, can we, not that, I just want to know option-wise, could we have like the, you know, sign-up sheet for, like, if we did an hour of public comment, we could have, that would be 30 people speaking. I don't know if that's feasible or within the charter.
Chair. Yeah, that is a common practice, even here in the city, if there's like a, you know, a topic that is expected to generate a lot of public comment. Other boards and commissions do have a sign-in sheet, and once that hour is over, you know, you don't have to accept any more public comment. Can the chair always suspend that and allow more comment if, you know, there's people waiting, but those are measures that you can implement.
Thank you.
Councilor Hida?
Yeah, I think for me, the only thing I'm probably hesitant on is allowing that person to speak again, because things might have changed in between the time that they were here and the time that they were able to hear some other people speak. Some things may have changed. They may be feel as though they want to add to it, or feel, and maybe give them that opportunity to say, yes, you spoke at this time, you have an opportunity to speak, but it'll be lesser time, or something like that, right? So just still give them that opportunity if, again, we want to make sure we're allowing as much civic engagement as possible.
No, I agree. I guess the problem with not knowing what could change from 1 week, well, for example, we just had a meeting last night. It's going to be 6 weeks, more or less, till we have our next meeting. If we had an item last night, which we didn't, where we held it and people spoke and we had this process, everybody could come back in 6 weeks and say, I've learned a lot more information. My position's changed, or it's stronger than it ever was. So I know this one frustrates. We don't have to decide anything today. There doesn't have to be any chairman's orders. My inclination, if my colleagues on this committee agree, is at the end of the day to hold some of the agenda items for a future meeting, because there are a lot of rules here, and we're never going to be satisfied with we've covered all the rules. But I want to try to get as many chairman's orders out as I can before the next meeting. So if we don't do a sign-in sheet, are we comfortable that people just speak twice? Because if we did a sign-in sheet and somebody's position changed, the chair could always waive the rule that they can't speak twice because they've signed in. If a person made the presentation that, I've learned something new. But I guess once you open that door, pretty much anybody could say that, and there's no way to know one way or the other. So I don't know.
My only thing to it is, you've been at this longer than me, so when it comes to this in particular, is it that much of an issue? Is that, you know what I mean, for you, or just in this process where we should really be looking into it deeply? Is like, how do we change that process? Or
I appreciate the question. I'll let Councilor Calorio answer as well, because we've had similar time in the council. But for me, it doesn't happen every week, but when it happens, it could take a lot of council time just to rehear things a week later. And it's the same, invariably, it's often the same people, or significant amount of same people with the same type of comments, which is fine. That's the democratic process. But I just don't know if we're, for me personally, when we're 2.5, 3 hours, well, let's say 2 hours into public comment, which happens, especially on contentious issues, I think it's harder for all of us to be efficient during the meeting, because now we're into 8 o'clock, 8:30, and we've got a whole agenda. I think we need everybody to have the opportunity to be heard. That's the democratic process. But being heard twice on the same issue within a week, usually when the schedule is going routinely, not in the summer, it's week to week, I'm not a big fan of that. And the mayor, the chair, does tell everybody, you can't speak twice. You can speak now or speak the next time, but it's just not enforced. So I know I'm not the only one that feels that way, because it's told to the public, but I don't know how many people come back or not. There's no way of knowing. It seems to me that oftentimes people come back a second time, which is their right. It's their building. But at the same time, hearing it twice within a week, I'm not sure how efficient that is. Councilor Calorio?
Through the chair, if I could add one thing, I certainly can after Councilor Calorio speaks if you'd like. I just wanted to clarify something.
Go ahead, Claire.
Through the chair, I do want to point out a section of the charter, and I defer to the solicitor if she has anything to add to this, but it does read that at any meeting of the city council, the citizens and employees of the city shall have a reasonable opportunity to be heard regarding any matter presently under consideration by the council. So I don't know if the solicitor has anything to clarify on that, if that would apply in this instance, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Through the chair, yeah, so that's the two provisions that I was referencing, that, be careful not to change that rule or to amend that rule that would take away the charter, right? But this is also, the next section is what this Rule 29C refers to, and because it's stated in there, you're still allowing the public or a resident to speak to the petition. It's just a one-time speak. You either speak at this meeting or the next meeting, so you're not prohibiting the participation.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Council Clario?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to go back to my original thought. My original thought was that people come here and they get in here and they, have their, speech ready and they want to testify, they're passionate about things. And then, the mayor says, because we can, number, is going to be held. And they go, oh, and they're like, it takes the wind right out of things. So my original point was, is there a way to better serve the public by, if council has a deadline, if they choose, because we can make a motion on the floor to hold anything at any time, but if we know ahead of time in the afternoon of Tuesday that we're going to hold this item for whatever reason, wouldn't it be better for our constituents to let them know and throw it up on the website and just say, and after a while, Louis, I understand what you were saying. People are driving here, they may not get online and stuff, but after a while, people will say, you know what, maybe I should check and see, I don't know if I want to go home or if I want to go down to the council meeting, but let me just quickly get online and see if the item's still going to be, because I think, even though people speak that first time, it's not anywhere near as good as speaking the night that we're all engaged. That's the night that the energy's there and the kind of the interaction is at its best. So I know people online, they hang up because they say, oh, he just said that number, whatever, is being held. So they hang up and they don't, contribute. Then they go, why did everyone else contribute? I'm like, I don't know, because they were here. But I think I'm just saying more as a notice to the public. So I guess mine is a little bit different than is the, having to speak twice. It's more like, I think people would appreciate it. I think people would be like, good, I'm going to go do my grocery shopping. I'm going to do this and that. You know what I mean? I don't want to go down there and they're not even discussing it. And then it becomes kind of like I don't know, the energy isn't there. We can't speak on it. They're looking for leadership on our part and we can't speak on it. So in that respect, that would be my comment, just, firsthand of what I'm thinking tonight.
No, I appreciate that. I think your suggestion is an excellent one, and it's all about courtesy. Maybe not have been doing much with the rule itself, but just presenting a way that people could be less inconvenienced, and in return, there'd be less need for people to speak twice. Councilor Hayda?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yes, Donna, I agree. So I guess I'm starting to just thinking about when someone puts in a petition and they're here to speak on it, they are notified that their petition would be on such and such date, right, on the agenda. And how are they notified? Is it through an email?
Through the chair, they're notified via, if they are filed a petition, they are notified via the mail or in email if we've been emailing corresponding with them.
Okay, yeah, so then great. So then going back to Council Calorio, so at the same time it's being posted online, it could just be sent as an email as well then, right? They can just be notified. It'll just be an email blast to everyone that has received it. Is that possible?
Through the chair, not everybody that files a petition or has something that applies to them, for instance, things like if it's an abutters list that we notified, they wouldn't necessarily receive an email from us. So in all instances, an email wouldn't necessarily apply.
Okay, but it's still possible to be able to send something out in that way though, right?
Through the chair, if we have their email on file, we could certainly notify them, but it is a matter of if we have ample time. So in this instance, it might be appropriate, say by 3 p.m. to receive notification of items being held, because we would have to have ample time in order for us to figure out who we would need to notify if something like an email were to go out. But if we were to post it just like we post regular agendas, then that might be an easier lift.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is not email that person in particular. It'll just be anyone or anything that's on this item, I guess, on the agenda item. whoever has received it will get an email. You get what I'm saying? So it's more of an email blast to whoever has received the agenda anyways.
Through the chair, are you asking, like, if we email, we do have an email list that we notify people who receive agendas in general. So on a weekly basis, they receive an agenda email every Friday when the agenda is published, and as well as an internal group who receive it here in City Hall or city employees. So that's certainly something that we could explore, but in terms of notifying the actual petitioner, they're not necessarily the ones that might be on that email blast.
Okay, yeah. I know, and I understand a lot of that does take time to be able to identify what petition it is and who will be showing up. But again, just trying to get ahead of things with, what Clorio has stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Clorio.
Yes, just want to add one more thing to that, through the chair to our clerk. If we could even put some kind of a disclosure at the end of the notice that goes out, because I know the notice that you guys send out, and say, please check at 4:00 p.m. on the day of the agenda item to make sure that it hasn't been canceled or postponed.
It's an excellent suggestion.
Just like they do in the jury polls. You check in beforehand, that way they can check on and give them the link to go on, and if we choose to proceed with this. I'm just saying, I'm thinking out loud, a way to, notify
No, I
people.
think that's a good suggestion. I actually was thinking along those lines, and so was in Council Lahita. So before I make a chairman's order, I just want to ask our Deputy City Solicitor, if we, on the agendas that come out on Friday, if we added a line, something to the effect that items or orders that are to be held, not all orders will be held ahead of time, but we have to find a way to word it. But if we word it along the lines of orders that are to be held will be listed on the city website by Tuesday at 4:00 or whatever, would there be any legal problems with the open meeting law or anything along those lines?
Through the chair, I don't see any violations or issues with the open meeting law with a statement like that. It's kind of just like a, check back to make sure your item is still going to be heard on Tuesday. However, there may be like a practical issue. I mean, what happens when we don't update our agenda because there's some, so I think it would be a convenience and a courtesy. I don't know if I would suggest amending the rules, but
No,
maybe,
I agree.
and we can't really forget that the privilege is, a right that any counselor has. So that night you could get to the meeting, so you're not going to avoid all, issues, but it would definitely be a courtesy and a convenience we could provide to the public.
Good, if I'm understanding correctly, and also if I understand my colleagues' suggestions, if the chairman's order would be to see if there's a way to include a notice when the when the city council agenda is sent out and made public, that some items may be held by personal privilege, and that, to the best of the city's ability, if known before the meeting, they will be posted by a certain time on Tuesday.
Through the chair, if I could let you know, the city clerk did just join remotely in case you had any further questions for him as well.
Great. That would be Nico. So, Mr. Vangelli, can you hear me?
Mr. Chairman, yes, and I apologize for joining a little late.
No. So we appreciate you joining us. For those listening, Nico Vangelli is our clerk. The question came up on personal privilege, whether there's a way to have less people inconvenienced coming and at the same time have less people, needing to speak twice. And although it's a difficult question, because we recognize that for a lot of people it's an inconvenience to come, and we don't want to eliminate their ability to speak in public on an item. At the same time, a lot of people speak twice, even though the chair tells them ahead of time, you got your choice, speak now or speak next meeting. So is there a way to put on the agenda that when it comes out typically on Fridays, that there'll be a posted list of known items to be held by a certain time and date on Tuesday, and then all the councilors will be told, if you know ahead of time that you're going to hold an item, please submit it by Tuesday at, let's say, 3 o'clock, and we'll post it on our website, so that people can check. Now, we know that all of us on the council can hold an item at any time, but there are certain items that I'm sure that are known ahead of time they're going to be held, that might less inconvenience people if they knew, and certainly would eliminate the need for people to have to speak twice. Are there practical problems? Doesn't seem to be legal problems. Are there practical problems, in your opinion, in doing that?
To the chair, to the committee, certainly it's possible. We do have the technology to do it. I think from the clerk perspective is having enough time to be able to post it. And in any, I think, given meeting, you're talking about 30 to 40 items. If it's a combined agenda, you're with the orders, I think it's probably over 60 to 80 items. So just a matter of having enough time, because we not only have to notify the item number, we also have to notify them of the item content and being able to upload that to the website. If there's a petition that is going to be held, if there's, let's say, one of the National Grid items, that includes a long list of abutters that will have to be notified. I think I joined in briefly when Councilor Hayden was asking if we can notify the petitioners. So that's certainly going to be a long process in terms of if we're notifying somebody who's digging up the street, let's say on Burncoat Street, and that's 60 to 100 residents.
Councilor Hito went beyond what I would have asked. I would ask to just be listed at a place where people, know to go to. So the agenda Friday would say, please check the city council website. I appreciate Councilor Hito's concern that if we have a list, maybe we should be letting people know as well. And that's if it's doable, that's important to do. Do we know, on average, and I think we're going to need more time with this item, but do we know on average, in a given year, like 2023, how many items were held on average per meeting?
I think we can certainly pull that data together. I don't have that top of my head. I can give you, I think, last night's meeting where when I got in the meeting, there was 0 notification. By, I think, mid-meeting, we were, during the announcements, there was 5 or 6. I think once the meeting started, you're talking about 5 or 6 helps.
So to me, and I'll certainly want to know what my colleagues think, but to me, I think before we take any action on this item, if this is doable, and I'll ask you and/or Claire to let me know if it is, I'd like to know how many items were held prior to the meeting and during the meeting for all the meetings we had in 2023 during each meeting, so we can kind of get an average. I know some of the meetings are going to be dual meetings, but I think it makes a big difference if we're talking about an average of 2 items per meeting versus an average of 10 items per meeting as far as the burden we're going to place on the clerk's office in doing this. And I don't have that information.
Mr. Chairman, if you can also allow me just to kind of put some more comments.
Sure, please.
Through the chair to the committee, we can certainly do that. That shouldn't be an issue. I think if the will of the committee, I would probably ask Mr. Chairman for also chairman's order to maybe review other municipalities, how they handle the held items. And if I can bring a report, also working with technical services, some of the technology we can review to use, to make it available to the public, if that's the will of the committee and the will of the council.
Well, it sounds like a good order to me. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Councilor Clorio, Councilor Hida, any further comments on this? No. With everybody's consent, I will make a chairman's order that we get the best practices from other communities on how to handle items that are held. We ask the clerk's office to do their best to track down the number of times an item was held before and during meetings during 2023, and also to collaborate with technical services to see what technology exists to put out notifications ahead of time for items that are intended to be held before the meeting. That sound, Mr. Clerk, does that sound like it covers what you would ask for?
Correct, Mr. Chairman, and if I can also make one more comment, if
Please.
you allow me. And I think, and I apologize, as I stated earlier, I joined a little late. I think the prior discussion also involved a sign-up process. I think we also brought something maybe a couple years ago during COVID in terms of having a sign-up process online for residents. I think the city of Cambridge and a couple of the cities do this. If you'd like, we can also kind of do a comparison of that and what other cities are doing and what we have for technology. So if the will of the council and this committee is to make the held items available online for viewing, we can also do some kind of process of people signing up until like 3 or 4 o'clock before the meeting and making that available.
I appreciate that. From my own perspective, I'm not asking for that type of information at this moment because I think asking people to sign in, although it's done elsewhere, doesn't seem to be any legal restrictions. I think we're only talking about that in the context of a held-up meeting and not a regular meeting, but I appreciate your input. Councilor Hida?
Yeah, it just came to my mind that maybe it's possible if we're sending it out online, right? We're making a post on the city website. They can actually just probably view it from a TV screen that's here. We have those big screens here. It'll be posted somewhere in the lobby area, in the hallway area. Screens there, and it'll just show items that are being held on the agenda.
No, that's a good suggestion. I guess the only question would be, how do we get to people before they come here so that they're less inconvenienced? And I think that would have to be on the city website and, as you suggested, emails.
Right, so then, yeah, so again, if they miss all that and they're coming up the stairs, you got the big screen TV there that shows, oh shoot, all right, maybe I go back downstairs.
Yeah, well, that's part of I appreciate that. It's part of the technology that I think that chairman's order would encompass, unless you want me to amend it any other way. Everybody good on that? Okay. Nico, thank you. Claire, thank you on that. I want to go to item 3B, with petition of Gordon T. Davis, requests the rules of City Council concerning petitions be amended so that the issues of the word order, the procedures for mootness, and the meaning of the word personalities are clarified in the revisions. Further request the rules of City Council be rewritten in plain English and Spanish to make explicit and clear what is prohibited from the City Council agenda. Further request City Council request City Clerk make public a list of all denials of applications to petition City Council and the reasons for the denials from January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2023. Mr. Davis, do you want to have round 2 with us?
Thank you. The reason I wrote the petition was that my petitions to City Council have been disallowed by City Solicitor on what I consider whimsical, frivolous, arbitrary. For example, he said I used the word order, and therefore I cannot use the word order in the petition. Then he said I used the word personality, and that he said personality means I can't name a person in my petition. So I asked him, can I name an office? Can I name a department? And essentially he said no. So, but there's other parts. I mean, that personality term should be defined in the definition of the City Council rules through the chair. Also, it should be some guidance as to what the rule means when it says that not under the general supervision and not specifically stated. There should be some guidance as to what that means and whether it applies to both petitions and to resolutions. There's no guidance there. So what happens is that the City Council, the City Solicitor, can then arbitrarily throw out or disallow petitions by the public. The other part of it, that's 2 parts. The other part of it is that there should be a translation into other languages for significant parts of the population. And this translation should be on the city website. And the third part is that, that's about all. Oh, yeah, the third part, excuse me, through the chair. The third part is, right now, there is no appeal when the city solicitor disallows an appeal. The city solicitor has been wrong on several times. There should be a way to appeal his rulings that a petition is not adequate or suitable to be allowed to have the city council hear it. Those are main thing. Right now, the city solicitor has complete veto power over what anyone petitions the city council. And I think that there should be a way to appeal that. Besides repeating the petition again and again and again, he'll just veto it again and again and again. So those are the 4 parts.
Okay, Mr. Davis, I got a suggestion, which you're welcome to take or not. I think it would be helpful for us to have a good discussion. This is the last item on. You're the only person here. The deputy city solicitor is here. We're going to address these items. Would you like to sit at the table here when we have the conversation with each other?
Sure.
Because I don't want to see you standing for a long time if you don't want to.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome to come before us, yeah.
I'm gonna cross the bar here.
Yeah. Congratulations.
You can sit in the middle there and then use this mic here.
I sit here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I'll put the mic on for you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're supposed to tell us we look better close up than on TV, but that's okay.
I'm legally blind. You
all
look
right.
the same far away as near.
Yeah, you don't want to know what it looks like.
Okay, Mr. Davis, and I'm trying to break down your request, and there's some interesting questions here. So I'm going to ask the city solicitor, on the definition of personalities, is that an archaic expression? Is there a definition? Should we try to find a way to define what that word means?
So the term personalities through the chair is described in Robert's rules, and it is a group of definitions and characteristics of decorum in a public meeting, and the city has historically interpreted rule number 11 to mean personalities in attacking a individual along with a subject matter that is not within the city council's purview, and that's historically been the interpretation of that rule.
Is there a way to get a copy of Robert's rules as part of that relates to the definition of personalities as part of a chairman's order?
Through the chair, yes, we could get a copy of that.
So, Mr. Davis, we're going to get a definition from Robert's Rules of Order, which is what the city council follows, of how they define personalities, because that's how although we don't have the definition, we're using the word personalities the same way they use the word, but they actually have a definition of it.
Okay, that would be fine.
So I don't know, I'm hopeful the next meeting in August, maybe we could have that, but I'm going to make several chairman's orders, and I'll do them all at the end. But I want to get to try to answer as many questions as you have. So we're going to get a definition of the word personalities. Further, you're requesting the rules of City Council be rewritten in plain English and Spanish to make explicit and clear what is prohibited. So my suggestion is, I'm going to make a chairman's order, we do that. I suspect my colleagues will agree. However, I think we could do it right away with what we have, or we can wait and see if we're going to change any of the wording based on this meeting, because there might be some rule changes. You've been here an hour and a half. You know we've discussed other rules.
I know.
So if we change those other rules and we convert this to a Spanish version, we're going to have to convert it again if there are new rules that are being made. I don't mind suggesting we do that, but it seems to me you'd want the final version as opposed to the work in progress. So I don't know.
Through the chair, I agree.
Okay.
Let's do it the most efficient way.
Okay. So why don't we wait to see what comes out of this rules committee? But I'll make I'll wait till Councilor Calori comes back. Councilor Hida, do you want to add any comments?
There was one more thing.
Okay.
Way to appeal the citizens.
No, we're gonna cover everything you're asking, but I want Councilor Hida to have his chance to make some comments.
Yeah, so in understanding, when when petitions are put in and residents have a hard time, or there's misunderstandings of what the petition should say, what it should look like. And I apologize for not knowing the answer. Do we have someone in place that assists residents in making sure that their petition does go through properly?
So I don't know if we have, if that's a question that Claire or Nico wants to tackle first.
Through the chair, I'm happy to give an overview of that unless the clerk has anything he'd like to add beforehand.
I'm sorry?
Through the chair, I'm happy to provide an overview of that process unless the clerk has anything he would like to
Okay, I'm
add
sorry,
beforehand.
I just was a little muffled, but Mr. Vangelli, do you want to respond to that? Do you want Ms. Robbins to respond to that?
Mr. Chairman, I can certainly respond to it, or it's up to Ms. Robbins, but.
Well, why don't you respond to it, because I think most people have mentioned your name in conjunction with conversations they've had about filing orders, if you're okay with it.
Of course. Through the chair to the committee and to Mr. Gordon. So basically, what happens is when a petition is filed with the city clerk's office, we review the content of the petition, and then we consult with the law department for the appropriateness of the agenda. If we find from the law department that the petition is not appropriate for the agenda, we notify the petitioner and we provide an overview of the reason that the petition wasn't allowed, and then we work with the petitioner maybe at the following meeting if they want to amend the language.
Mr. Davis, I'm going to give you an opportunity that you deserve, which is to respond with any questions you have, but just address the clerk through the chair, if you could.
All right, through the chair.
And you might want to turn the microphone on. It's on, okay, I'm sorry. You can tilt it closer.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Through the chair, that has not been the process that I experienced, as indicated by the city clerk. It goes to the city solicitor. So the city solicitor writes his opinion. Many times his opinion is wrong and goes against the black letter law of the city council rules. And there's nothing else that happens. Nobody comes back and says, well, suggest how to write it the proper way. It's just gone.
Mr. Davis, let me ask this deputy city solicitor who's here if she could weigh in on her understanding of what the process is.
Through the chair, the process, how I understand it and how I've been involved the last couple of years is that if there is a petition that is...
I don't know if your microphone's on, I'm sorry. It is?
Yeah.
Just lift it up a little more.
Hi. Okay. Through the chair, the process, how I understand it, is that if there is a petition in which the clerk has a question or they're not sure whether it's appropriate for the agenda, they consult with the city solicitor and together we make that decision, or, but the ultimate decision maker is the clerk, and that decision is appealable to the city council. So a petitioner who has had their petition denied for not being appropriate under the jurisdiction of the city council can either request that an individual councilor bring the petition forth on an agenda, or request that the council as a whole suspend their rules to take up the petition, or they could file a subsequent petition seeking an explanation of the decision why that petition was denied. So it is a consultation with the law department.
Could I ask a question, Ms. Kalkunas? Could somebody whose petition that was denied just simply file a petition appealing the denial to the city council?
So they could file a follow-up petition requesting an explanation and the city council to suspend their rules. That would be in conjunction, then the mayor would do that with the clerk.
And how would they, if I may, how would that person, how do we make people aware of the process? Because Mr. Davis is bringing an issue forward, which is an interesting issue. I've been on the council 10 years, and I don't think we've ever had this conversation. I always just assume Something gets denied, it gets denied. So I didn't realize that somebody could approach the council. So how would somebody in Mr. Davis's position or someone else be made aware of that? How can we do that?
So the clerk's office would, if I understand correctly, the clerk's office works with the petitioner to either reword the petition in a manner that would make it appropriate to be placed on an agenda.
Could we have the clerk's office have a letter or piece of paper available to give somebody whose petition's been denied as to what their options are upon the petition being denied?
I mean, I would defer to the clerk's office, but legally I don't see a issue with that. We could provide more information on rights after a petition has been deemed not appropriate for an agenda.
Thank you. Mr. Vangelli, what are your thoughts on that?
Through the chair to the committee, we can certainly do that. We can probably even put on the back of the petition to state the options that the petition has if it's denied. I know, we do try to work with all the petitioners. I think Mr. Pottle has worked with Mr. Davis in certain occasions when his original petition was denied and there was follow-up petitions filed. I don't have, the full list of petitions in front of me to bring them up as examples, but that's certainly something we can do Mr. Chairman, if you want to do a chairman's order, we can adjust the petition form right away.
Well, let me see what my colleagues say on the committee. Councilor Calorio?
I think that's a great idea. I think that we need to have a follow-up process that someone feels that if their item has been denied, how can they appeal it? We all want to know what the next step is. So I agree with that. I think that would be an excellent idea to put the follow-up step on the back of the petition. So I agree with that.
Councilor Hayda?
I don't know. I'm kind of taken aback by knowing that if there's a petition that isn't moved forward, that the person that's putting in the petition isn't notified of they have an opportunity to reach out to a counselor and support them in figuring out how it's done. So I'm really interested in seeing how many times has this happened where someone put a petition in.
No, I appreciate the question. So just jumping ahead to one of Mr. Davis's asks, we're going to come back to this, Mr. Davis. We're going to come back to the issue of appealing in 1 minute.
Okay.
But you also asked for a list of all the denials of the applications, and Councilor Hayda mentioned that as well. And you asked for the period of 2020, January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2023, a period of 2 years. So, Mr. Vangelli, my understanding is you're putting something like that together. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the committee, correct. We're working on a communication, and it has an explanation of all the petitions that have come through the clerk's office, the consultation we've had with the law department, and the reason of the petition being denied, and they'll be coming to City Council hopefully at the August meeting.
Thank you. Councilor Hayda?
Yeah, well, again, if there is a process and if it's being denied for whatever reason, there's also next steps, right? And the next steps is notifying the resident, letting them know, and then they have the opportunity to reach out to a council. So it kind of seems like they weren't notified of what those next steps are. So I just don't understand why that wasn't, it doesn't seem like it has taken place, obviously, in his case.
Well, I'll ask the clerk to respond, but I would just say I don't know if, legal advice is necessarily what the city clerk's office gives out, so it puts them in a very difficult position as far as, I would assume, in giving out that kind of advice. But I'll let Mr. Vangelli, could you comment on a typical situation in which somebody's petition gets referred to the law department because you're not sure it's appropriate under the rule, and you decide based on their consultation that it should be denied. Is there any conversation with the petitioner at that point about what to do next, or is it, how does it go? If you could share that with us.
Through the chair to the committee. So let me give you an overview again of what has taken place with this rule. So the rule was put in place. So the city clerk consults with the city solicitor regarding the appropriateness of a petition. When a petition comes forward, that the solicitor says it's not appropriate for the agenda, we then respond to the petitioner that the petition is not appropriate with the next steps. As I stated earlier, we've worked with Mr. Davis on several occasions to get his petitions on once they were rejected. There has been cases where Mr. Davis has refused to change the language of those petitions. In the case of the city council getting involved in bringing those orders forward, it kind of makes that rule moot at this point. That my recommendation would be just take out the rule altogether.
May I respond?
Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
I never refused to change a petition. What happened if you don't know that you can change a petition? How can you respond to it?
Can I just suggest this, Mr. Davis? I think all of us here want to make sure that your experience, like everyone else's with City Hall and the City Council, is a positive one. So we can't be the jury on what happened in the past. We can only try to be proactive to make sure that things go better in the future. So I'm not making excuses for any situations. I just wasn't there. But I want to make sure that in the future, either your petitions, are put through, or that you have options if they're not. So, and not just you. I think that's appropriate for everyone. That's what we're here for. We're here to listen to everybody's concerns that wants to present those concerns to us. So, I'm going to ask our Deputy City Solicitor, Mr. Vangelli makes an interesting point, is if the option is to go through just a city councilor, does that circumvent the rule as far as the clerk being the arbiter of which petitions get before us?
Through the chair, maybe, but then, I mean, certain petitions might not want to be brought by a city councilor, so I think you're prohibiting the right of a resident to petition an item. For the most part, petitions are allowed on the agenda, so in the rare instance that a resident would need support from their councilor, then that's when that would be used.
Well, I mean, I think we need to see how many items were denied and the reasons for them, and I'm confident we'll have that for the April meeting. I want to make a chairman's order that the definition of personalities consistent with Robert's Rules of Order be made available for the next meeting. I also want to make a chairman's order that once these rules of the City Council are, if any changes are made or finalized, that a version of it be made in Spanish and available on the city website. Either of my colleagues have any comments regarding either of those chairman's orders? Mr. Davis, so we've tackled, I think, your concern about finding the definition of personalities, okay? We're going to tackle putting this in Spanish once we have a final version of the rules, because some of the rules may or may not change. We'll know that as a result of this meeting and perhaps another meeting after that. We're also getting a list, we expect, for the August meeting of all the denials for that 2-year period and the reasons for the denials. And I'm also going to make it, well, let me ask Mr. Vangelli. Mr. Vangelli, what would your thoughts be on how to publicize somebody's next step if a petition is denied, and how to best do that?
Through the chair to the committee at this point, I think we'll have to have a conversation with the law department and maybe this committee and the council, because when we add those next steps, we have to clarify, first of all, I think from my opinion as clerk, is what is the role of the city councilor? Does the city council have the same role as a petitioner petitioning the body for an agenda? So if we're going to make a recommendation that the petitioner, rather than go through the petition process, goes to the city councilor, we have to clarify that from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman. So I think there has to be a bigger discussion from my perspective as clerk.
Deputy City Solicitor Kalkunas, your thoughts on that?
Through the chair, I think this would probably be a topic that we should come back to you with a report on. There are other options when a petition is denied, but we'd have to look into the language and the specifics.
Okay. How would you recommend a chairman's order be worded so that the clerk's office, the city solicitor's office can work together to try to find a way to to make sure people are aware of something without stepping on the authority of the clerk's office or the authority of the city councilor.
I would probably request a definition or a clarification on Rule 11 regarding denial of petitions and challenges to the denial of that petition through the clerk in the city solicitor's office. So,
Mr. Vangelli, does that sound like a order that's worded in a way that you're comfortable with?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. They can certainly, work with the solicitor to bring back a report. This way, when we put the language on the petition, we can have that a proper language so there's no questions from the residents.
Ms. Robbins, could you copy what Deputy City Solicitor Kalkunas said so I don't have to?
Through the chair, certainly, I was able to,
I don't think I can improve upon it.
I was able to get her language for the chairman's order.
So, Mr. Davis, just so you're clear, we're going to come back in August with a list of all the denials and all the explanations. We're going to wait till the rules are finalized, and there's already a chairman's order to do it in Spanish once the rules are finalized. We're going to get a definition of what personalities means for the next city council meeting, and the clerk's office and the city solicitor's office are going to work together to come up with a report outlining, without stepping on the clerk's authority or without stepping on the city council's authority, how to respond to a petition that's been denied. And we're gonna publicize that once we figure out how to legally approach that. Does that satisfy for the moment
Yes.
your items?
Yeah, to the chair. Yes, that's agreeable.
Okay, that's all we can do for now.
I'm happy that you've done that.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us at the table. I think that worked out better.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, everyone have a good night.
You too. To my colleagues, there are many more rules that we haven't tackled. My suggestion would be, under agenda item 3A, so we hold that item. We have some chairman's orders. Under item 3B, I think we have to wait for some reports to come back, so we probably should hold that as well. So we'll hold both those items pending further reports and further opportunity to meet. Ms. Robbins, I think that's it for the agenda items, is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. Items 3A and 3B and your intent to hold them, correct?
Mr. Vangelli, do you have any other comments to add to any of the agenda items?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly can work on those reports, and as I stated earlier, I think what we'll do for the August meeting is bring back the petitions that have been rejected, and I think I'll also bring back any communications the city clerk's office has had with petitioners regarding these rejections.
Thank you. Attorney Kalkunas, are we all set as far as the city solicitor's office?
through the chair, we're all set. Thank you.
As far as my colleagues, are you fine with us adjourning the meeting? Okay, so we'll take a roll call, please, Claire, on my motion to hold items 3A and 3B, and then a roll call on a motion to adjourn.
Councilor Ojeda?
Yes.
Councilor Calorio?
Yes.
And Chairperson Councilor Bergman?
Yes.
And then on your motion to adjourn, Councilor Ojeda?
Yes.
Councilor Calorio?
Yes.
And Chairperson Councilor Bergman?
Yeah, so it looks like 6:45, approximately the meeting is adjourned.